Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, supported by Lecole, here with Benji Naesen for the Giro d'Italia Stage 11 recap, the Montalcino wine stage, the gravel stage with 35 Ks of gravel in the last 70. I think that's a higher proportion than Strada Bianca itself. I might have just made up that statistic. Here is the profile, though, in detail. 163 kilometers long. We have the first 46 Ks easy, no strade at all. There's a few climbs, and then the Settore start with 70 Ks to go. And the first one's got actually the longest downhill section of gravel descending, and it's about a 9K long section, and then they do a 3.7K, 8.3% gravel climb. They then have a false flat sort of ridge, and then another climb up to, it's called the Passo del Lume Spento. Benji correctly called these false, they're fake news climbs, these ones. They're like quite steep when they're actually going uphill and then downhill, and the average grade is a lie. Long road descent, another climb, a gravel climb, descent on the road again. So that's pretty good safety-wise, one has to say. And then the final climb starts with about 15 Ks to go. Passo del Lume Spento, again, 9.2 Ks, 4.5%, then a descent into the finish in Montalcino. Benji, how are you feeling after the solo podcast yesterday? Thanks very much for doing that, by the way.
No worries. I actually, I enjoyed it, but I'm glad you're back, honestly. It's different and it's a bit more of a struggle, but I was so looking forward to this stage, and I don't think I would be able to recap everything on my own, looking at how this stage went. So I guess I'll dive right into it.
I need a bit of help too.
Yeah?
Because
I get that.
why am I still wearing the sunnies in Europe? Well, because my eyes are just bloodshot right now. I don't know how I've managed to fly from Australia to Europe and not miss a single minute of Giro racing, but that is, I'm pretty happy with that. Before Benji lets you know what happened with the breakaway in this stage, I want a big shout out to our show partner, Lecole. They've got the Project Aero McLaren collab going on right now. They've got the Velo Games LS League, where I think Benji's doing, unfortunately, pretty well right now, better than me. And so the winners of that receive kit. If you're not in the Velo Games League, there's the LRCP20 discount code, LRCP20, all caps discount code for 20% off. There's Strava challenges. Lecole just hit 500,000 members on Strava. So a lot's happening with Lecole at the moment. So just wanted to let you know all those things. If you want to check out their kit, the link is down below. They support the channel. Benji, this breakaway.
So for this breakaway, we expected big stuff. I thought we'd see people like perhaps a Bettiol sent forward just in case before the Cerrado sections happen, before the race really opens up, as a bit of satellite riders on these races, and all that stuff didn't really come into play. I expected much more from the break. Like, we had... Yeah, no, it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. We had attacks with Laurens Naesen, Dries de Bond, Batalin, Gavazzi, Guglielmi, Van der Hoorn, Kluge, Van Hoeke, Lindemann, Schmidt, and Covey. And this was one of the first attacks of the day. Like, usually in the last mountain stage and hill stage, we had 60 Ks of trying to get in the breakaway. I was expecting the same on this kind of stage, but the second that these riders got away, Ineos put themselves at the front of the group, and they were like, it's done, people. They could still try to attack, but they did that at the right moment, making sure the gap from the peloton to the breakaway is significant so that it's harder for people to bridge. And yeah, this breakaway group has some interesting candidates. I think that Laurens Naesen was top 3 in the Elfsteden Ronde, I think it's called. Some couple races we had in Bruges a few years ago. I actually wrote the sportif of that race a few years ago, and I inherently died doing so. Dries de Bond, he Belgian champion, of course, also decent at cobbles, has not really gotten a strong victory outside of the Belgian championships. He's gotten some lower Belgian classics, Battalion, where you know him, has a bit of a punch, but hasn't been there for years now, I think. Van Hoeke, the climber, Gavazzi, we saw him the other day when Lafay won, Guglielmi, Van der Hoorn, we know who Taco is by now, Roger Kluge, the lead out, Schmidt, and Covey. I think Covey's the one that I was really interested in because I thought Gerardsbergen last year, he had a great result. That is the final cobble stage of Bing Bang Tour, so that would really fit here. I honestly didn't know much about this guy named Mauro Schmidt from Quebec Assholes. And
there's so many riders I thought would get a stronger break. But yeah, go on, Benji. I mean, 14 minutes or something because no one wanted to help Ineos. Why did no one want to help Ineos pace this? Why didn't EF pace or other teams pace like Bahrain?
Well, I think that at that point, that break was gone with no important riders for any team, like no satellite riders for any team that is really important for GC. So I think that Ineos didn't really want to pace. They didn't really want to control the race for the breakaway necessarily. They didn't want to win the stage today. As to be honest, I wouldn't know the value of doing so for like 50 kilometers before the Cerrado sections anyway, if they can just drop the bomb on the Cerrado sections themselves. And other teams, like, why would you? You're basically bringing a team with Ineos to the first Cerrado section, and you know that they're going to do something. So why would you pace in the peloton? I don't know. I think that the only thing you can say is perhaps for the stage, but I think there's more important things than the stage in this Giro for a lot of the GC teams, and that's genuinely GC.
Before we get to that first Cerrado stage, I just want to expand on what Benji's talking about, because it was already on Italian, the Rijeka Ridge. People asking, why don't Ineos pace the break back? Because, spoiler alert, the break wins this stage. We told you there's a 14-minute gap to the breakaway with like 80 Ks to go. The break wins this stage. And the reason why Ineos don't pace is, first priority, never let Egan Bernal be isolated until the last 15, 20 Ks of the race. And that's priority number one. Two, they don't care about the stage win. They're happy to just put pressure on their GC rivals on the road. He's not going for a Pog and Rog bonus second sort of strategy or Roglic strategy. Three, they want to keep the team together so they can hit designated sections as hard as possible with Ganna, Castroviejo, and Puccio. They maybe control a little bit with Puccio, who can't do the high watts on those sections. They don't want to just pace on descents and flat sections with Ganna on non-gravel sections and in medium mountain stages. You didn't see that the other day when Bernal won that stage. He only won because FDJ kept that break really close, and then when Ineos wanted to hit it late, the gap was close enough for then Bernal to bridge across. Ineos had no interest in pacing all day, burning Ganna and Moscon. So then when it actually comes to crunch time, they're not there to pace. So that's why Ineos keep their troops in reserve, and that's why we're seeing a lot of breakaways winning, in my view, because other teams are not strong enough or willing enough to actually take them on early. But Benji, that first sector and Ineos hitting it hard, let the people know what happened.
So what happens before a bit of a sector is that every single team wants to get their riders to the front of that group and place them in a situation where they're as positioned as possible for the upcoming sector. And we saw that Ineos, we know that they're so strong at positioning themselves before sectors and before doing important things, before sprints, 30-kilometer rule in flat stages, that kind of stuff. We know they're great at it. And they went to the front. They sat Bernal, I think, in third position behind two Ineos riders, a few Ineos riders in the wheel of Bernal just to take over if necessary. And we saw that other teams were trying the same. Evenepoel was relatively close to the front as well. But the moment they were starting to come towards the section, it looked like Evenepoel was being pushed behind a bit by all the other teams trying to get over him. And that's a bit of the washing machine effect that they call it, the washing machine effect, as the other riders try and engulf the riders in front of them to get in a better position. And it caused Remco to be in 20th position or so going into that first Cerrado section. And we said it before. I said it yesterday as well. Positioning is key on this terrain, and that's a huge mistake. And if he starts in 20th position, then he has to pass a lot of people that might not be able to follow what Ineos is about to do to everybody, because Ineos was prepping and Ineos went to the front. Ganna in first wheel. They go on to the Cerrado section and Ganna starts hammering the hell out of the group. I don't know what watts he was pulling, but
600 minimum.
I bet he can launch a rocket to Mars with it, so Elon Musk could give him a call. But to be fairly honest, like, Ganna was so powerful on this first section to the point where in a certain corner, he almost crashed himself because he went so fast over it. And that's maybe an indicator that he was very much taking risks to do this. And it certainly paid off, because after a good, I think we were about 30% into the Cerrado section, we saw gaps opening up in the back. And we saw perhaps one rider on the left having a puncture, two riders from Cofidis crashing on the side. I hope that it's nothing too bad. I thought Berhan was part of it, looked pretty good, but some other rider was still laying there. So I hope there's nothing bad there. We could see it on their social media channels. But,
this is with 60k to go, by the way. This is not close to the finish. There's 60k to go. And the reason Ganna's hitting it so early is because Ineos believe correctly that he's not going to get over the 3k 9% climb that's coming up after the first gravel section. So just spend him there. And that's what they did. They gapped Evenepoel, and he was on the wrong side of that split, whether that's through legs, bad positioning, descending, because there was half of this gravel section was descending. We don't know exactly. Benji and I will opine on that later. And so a group goes clear, and Bernal is just clinging right to Ganna's wheel. What did that gap get up to eventually, Benji? With you had two Ineos and Movistar pulling at the front with 50k's to go, and then you had EF, Astana, De Koenig caught out behind. What was the most that gap went up to? 45, or was it even more?
Yeah, I think it was around 40, 45 at that point. It might have been a tiny bit more, but on the Stratos section, it was mainly the moment that Remco was caught behind that second group, well, at the back of the second group, that caused the trouble for the Koenig, because they were all around Remco at the moment. So they had teammates for him, but they weren't at the front of the group, so they couldn't set the pacing. And it's not easy to pass everybody on the gravel section to get to the front of that second group to start that pacing. And yeah, Ganna could pull even more until the rider from Remco's team, I don't know which one it was, I think Honore was at the front of the group at a certain point, pacing pretty hard to try and save that. Daniel Martinez of Ineos was also in the group of Remco, so that's a bit of a mixed thing for Ineos, but I don't think they care about him. I don't think they care about him in this situation. I think they said, Bernal's taking time on Remco, let's hammer it, and they kept on going. And I think by the end of the Stratos section that Remco had somewhat of help in that second group, and that caused the gap to lower a bit. And I think it went to a good 30 seconds going off the first Stratos section, which means that on the asphalt section, the normal road section just after it, that they honestly had, I'm not sure if you can call it an advantage, but they had an advantage over earlier on the gravel section, because it's going to go better on the normal road if you got dropped on a gravel section than on the gravel section beforehand. But they had to pace against Ganna as a whole team of the Koenig. And if that is happening, you know you're going to spend a lot of riders. And by the end of that road section, I think that Remco had one rider left, Almeida. And if you've got one rider left, then it ain't looking good for you.
And he was having to pull it himself. Evenepoel was having to do work himself. They do get back. 48k's to go, that third group, because they've got the Break, Ineos group, and the De Koenig Astana EF group. They do get back before the Passo del Lume Spento, maybe the first of the longer climbs of the day. And it seemed like that climb didn't get done at the hottest pace, Benji. And there's a few reasons why I think the climb, I haven't got the Strava data yet, a few reasons why I don't think that climb did done by the hottest pace. Martinez was pulling. He's a man who was already having issues, so he would have been tired. Well, he was sitting on with Remco, but still, he was not in great position earlier. Didn't have a good day. Luis Leon Sanchez was pulling for so long, in that group as well. And most of all, the biggest example is with about 38k's to go, George Bennett attacked with Tobias Foss on his wheel. I actually quite liked this move, actually. I think it was quite a good move. Mm-hmm. But the point is, if the teams were smashing it, I don't think you'd be seeing a George Bennett, Tobias Foss attack. And Vermeer, no one was really dropping apart from Vermeer. But Benji, I've just said that. I've just said, the pace wasn't so hot. But where was Evenepoel still after they got back to that group?
Yeah, they got back to the group, and he was at the back of that group just trying to hold on, and at certain points he was on a bit of a gap, but it looked to me like on the first section he was having more trouble with the positioning earlier on, and he just spent a lot of energy trying to get back, because you got to keep in mind the first section was the most technical one, according to riders like Bettiol saying so beforehand. The second one was not as technical, but had the uphill section. So I think that Ineos was clever pulling hard on the first one and not on the second one, because you know that Remco, I expected him to have more trouble with positioning and with bike handling on the first sector compared to the climbing aspect of the second sector. And that was a really clever move. They brought him in trouble. He had to spend energy to come back. And by the time he was on that second, whatever the climb's called again, I forgot. But on that second, Lume Spento, on that climb, he was towards the end of the group. And I think that at that moment I was already very worried. I think that you started saying, first of all, I think in private to me in chat, his positioning is pretty off. And then you started saying, his legs don't look great either. And once you've got those two things set up, then it's not looking too good for the rest of the stage, does it?
I mean, I know, and that's what happened. You see Ineos, I was somewhat surprised they didn't attack with Narvaez. I mean, Evenepoel's positioning was really bad, and he could have moved up. They got to road sections where they weren't fanned all out blocking the road. There was opportunities to move up. Almeida was up there fourth, fifth wheel. He had moved up at a certain point. So Evenepoel's just lingering at the back, Simon Yates style, but you're less concerned when Yates does it because that's just what he does, and he seems to be fine riding in that fashion. Whereas I don't think that's where Evenepoel or Quickstep wanted him to be. So Ineos basically let the other teams do a bit of the work. They don't try and bridge across to Foss and Bennett, who probably would have worked with them. I thought that could have been an option. Moscon bridging Bernal across, and it's basically all together. None of the GC contenders are getting dropped. And then finally, we've got the last or second to last gravel section, and we see Moscon coming to the front. And we know it's time. And Narvaez first. Narvaez was pacing the road descent beforehand. A little bit curious, maybe not entirely necessary. Evenepoel had moved up to fifth wheel at this point. So we've got, I think, if I count correctly, under 20 Ks to go, about 22 Ks to go, second to last gravel sector, a longer climb. Evenepoel's moved up to fifth wheel on this road descent. They hit the base of that gravel, and Evenepoel, we immediately see on the overhead shot, he's being spat under the pressure of Narvaez and Moscon. He's gone from fifth wheel to the back of the group, and it was almost game over for him at that point, particularly with Moscon pulling and Bernal looking so good. All the other GC contenders were right there, and that's with 20 Ks to go. 5 kilometers later, Almeida goes back to help Evenepoel for this last descent with about 15 kilometers to go. We'll talk about what should have happened there, but I'm just saying that's a long time. And Evenepoel's been dropped on that climb as Bernal and Moscon have accelerated. He's eventually lost the gap. There's a short descent sections where he just loses touch, and he's in the hoods going really slowly into a little short descent in the gravel, loses touch. That is it. And the group just is working really well ahead. And did you expect anything different, Benji? What did you see? Was it mostly Bernal, or who EF were contributing as well, even Movistar at times?
Yep. It was quite intense that EF had so many riders still involved at that point, because Garfi on the previous climb was actually looking a bit meh when it comes to bike handling on the climb itself. He was off-road for a few times, but eventually he had no issue in the end, because he had I think 2 to 3 teammates still. Absolutely crazy how they were pacing there. And if you've got so many teammates pacing against that Remco Evenepoel behind with one teammate, then you're going to gain time. But to be honest, on the descent section, I feel like the gap went down a bit. I think it went down to 50 seconds, 45 seconds from the 1 minute 20 that Remco Evenepoel got behind on the previous climb. And I think that was due to the fact that Almeida finally got back to the to the group that
road
Evenepoel was
too.
in. Yeah, correct. And doing that descent, they crawled back a bit, but you know that the last Cerrado section's upcoming just after that descent. You know it's coming, and you know you're going to have trouble if you get on it, because it's also going uphill just after the Cerrado section. You've got no time to just quite simply rest. You've got no time to rest after the Cerrado section.
It's all up and down.
Exactly.
And he's been trying to bridge back to moves all day. We should respect the break a little bit, Benji.
Correct.
Dries de Bont, Mauro Schmidt, and Covey have gone clear. UAE, Alpecin, and Quebecer Assos. They've dropped Kluger, who'd been working Mohoric style for Maida. Well, Kluger's working in that fashion for Van Hoeke, attacking, looking really strong, but neither of them were able to get into that group of 3. They go clear, and eventually they drop de Bont, Schmidt, and Covey. They go over the top of the Lume Spento, and with about 3-4 Ks to go, and you've got this descent, quite technical actually, into the finish, Sienna style. It's very hard to pass, and then there's a lot that they have a left-hand corner, and then 250 meters plus of a sprint, which is a long sprint with no lead out when you've had a tiring day in the break. Those two, Schmidt and Covey, they attacked each other a few times, then pretty much just accepted it was going to a sprint. They go side by side. They open it up. with 250 meters to go, and Schmidt just had the legs to keep sprinting all the way to the line. Probably, I'd say definitely the underdog to Covey, who's like supposed to be improving. It's a good stage from him as well today, but yeah, I think Covey would have been the favourite for that sprint. They were kind of overshadowed by the GC action at Evenepoel, but I've got to say, 21 years old, Mauro Schmidt, first year at World
Crazy.
Tour level, come from Conti level from last year. Unbelievable, Benji. Do you know any other tidbits about him, or has he just come out of nowhere?
I don't have a clue. I know that he's ridden well because I remember his name in the top 15 or top 10 somewhere, but I don't know the history of him. I'd have to look him up on Pro Cycling Status or First Cycling. So I generally don't know. I can't add more about this rider. It doesn't happen often, but with Schmidt, it seriously does. But next to the wonderful performance by Mauro Schmidt in that breakaway, taking home this first victory quite amazingly, we also still had the action behind, and I think that it all started spicing up again the moment that, well, it never stopped spicing down. But I think the second that we hit the last auto section and the climb after it, we saw Remco in trouble, quite genuinely. He was behind. Almeida was still there. But at a certain point, I think Attila Valter was in the same group as him, and they had a gap of a good 1 minute, 1:10 to the group ahead. And Remco just lost the wheel. He could not follow anymore on the uphill section. Complete trouble to follow.
Of Almeida.
Exactly, of his teammate. Valter dropping them both, which is fun to see, but at the end of the stage, it didn't really come into play. But towards the top of that climb, you also saw some action in the group ahead, right?
Or Vlasov. Yeah, Vlasov was very aggressive, even on the flatter sections of that climb. And the problem was Vlasov mistimed his attacks today. Again, I think EF had 3 riders in the group, Carthy, and then he had Bettiol and I think Guerrero working for him as purely as domestiques because the breaker's gone. So no stage win chances. But you got Bettiol pacing like mad. So Vlasov attacks, Bettiol's like, nah, pacing that back. So that's his first attack. And then after that, there's an acceleration from Ciccone. Bernal's got no domestique, so Bernal is actually conserving a bit. He's not just going to pace this group. We've got every GC contender here pretty much, except for Evenepoel. Bernal's not going to be played like a fool, even though he's wearing the Maglia, and burn himself completely and then get attacked in the last steep section of the Spento climb. So he's sitting in, but he gets fortunate because Bahrain have Bilbao pacing for Caruso. EF, as I said, have riders pacing for Carthy. So he doesn't have to, and those attacks from the other GC contenders get brought back, except for Buchmann. Emmanuel Buchmann has a well-timed, I don't even know if it was well-timed. It's just the respect wasn't put on his name the same way Vlasov was. When Vlasov attacks, Bernal follows and closes, or EF. When Buchmann attacked, he looked behind 3, 6, 4 times. He's looking, guys, I'm about to attack. He attacks, not a hard acceleration, and they let him go. Maybe it was perfect timing because everyone was tired on that point of the climb. Ciccone was getting dropped. Nibali's being dropped. Soler's dropped after he'd sort of had an acceleration earlier. And then Carthy attacks with 3Ks to go. Buchmann's got a healthy 12 to 15 second gap. Tobias Foss is up there attacking after Vlasov has counted off Carthy's move. Vlasov, a nice attack. He's got Bernal on his wheel. And this, Benji, say the word. I didn't think it merited it the other day, but this move from Bernal was something else.
I honestly don't know what you're talking about. I think that a lot of people might know, but I just lost the word, I'm afraid. So was it thermonuclear?
Yeah. Thermonuclear. It's not thermobiblical. Let's settle down. You got to win the race for that. But it's thermonuclear attack from Bernal, countering off Vlasov. He all goes out of the overhead shot with 2.4 Ks to go, just in the last bit of that climb, and he's bridging across to Buchmann at a rate of knots. And good for Buchmann as being a satellite rider, because Bernal gets across to Buchmann. He says to him, he flicks, get on my wheel. He's not concerned about Buchmann on GC as at this moment. He's more concerned about gapping Carthy and Vlasov and keeping the gap to Evenepoel, which is stabilized because of all this messing about Carthy, Vlasov, Soler, Ciccone, all attacking. That gap's just stabilized at about 2 minutes. So Bernal's working with Buchmann. They pace through to the line. Bernal doing about 80% of the work, Buchmann contributing, and then Bernal outkicks him at the end to be the first of the GC contenders and look the most dominant of them, frankly, too. So here's the full results. And I'll sort of categorize it GC and break. It's pretty polarized. Top 10, Schmidt, Covey, Van Hoeke, De Bont, Guglielmi, Bataille, Kluge, Gavazzi, Van der Hoorn, Lawrence, Narson's the top 10. So great stage win from Schmidt and Covey. Van Hoeke missing out. GC men now start at 11. Bernal on 3:09, 3 seconds ahead of Buchmann and 23 seconds ahead of Vlasov. Vlasov overextended, I think, again today, attacking before Bernal, and it got countered by Bernal again. And he should have been finishing with Buchmann at least. He was as strong as him. Caruso, fourth of the GC men, 26 back in a group with Yates and Foss. I think Yates looked very good today. Foss, I cannot believe they dropped him back to help Bennett earlier. Doesn't look good. And then Carthy lost another 6 seconds to 30 seconds plus back. And then big gaps now. Ciccone, he fully cracked in the last 5 kilometers, losing a minute and 50 seconds almost to Egan. Bernal, that's a big loss. Marc Soler lost a lot of time. But the question was, where's Evenepoel? And so Evenepoel, if my maths is correct, lost 2 minutes and 8 seconds to Egan Bernal. I don't think that's a disaster, Benji.
I honestly as well. It could have been
a lot worse. Yeah.
If Almeida crawled back 5... Was it 5 kilometers or 5 minutes? But
5 kilometers.
5 kilometers, Remco had to pace alone because Almeida stayed in the group ahead. I don't know if it's because Remco didn't communicate, but if you're Almeida and you're having to work for someone, then you should look around. So I don't think Almeida has an excuse here. He should have been back at Evenepoel the second he got dropped, and it took him 5 kilometers, which means that the gap probably expanded by 20, 25 seconds at least, which at the end would probably change a lot because that's 20, 25 seconds that is not the gap, but it's also a lot of time that Remco doesn't have to ride alone and is probably having a bit of a emotional tantrum because, quite honestly, if you're in this situation, you got to focus on, I don't know, perhaps it's like because he's angry at the team that Almeida's not waiting, or it's because he needs to go into the zone or otherwise he's not getting out of this. I don't know which one of the two it is. I don't know him that personally, I guess. So
I don't blame him, Almeida. If people want to point the finger at he wasn't professional today by not going back quickly, I'd like to point out that 2 days before the Giro d'Italia started, where Quickstep and Remco and Lefebvre had been saying he was the GC leader for weeks, 2 days before the Giro started. We did a separate video on this on the Clips channel. Lefebvre came out and said, we're not re-signing Almeida next year. His agent wants way too much money. He's not that good. Come on. And so if I was him, I'd think, well, you're not paying my salary next year. You're going to pay me out this year, and I'm moving teams. Doesn't it make more sense for me to get the best result for myself possible here? And also, fuck you for that unprofessional comment in the media. And he's like 22 years old. So I see where his head might be at if he didn't drop back on purpose. Maybe in his defense, he's at fourth wheel all the time, Benji. And this is the big topic. Why is Remco dropping? You already mentioned, is it the legs? Is it the positioning? Is it the descending? I think it starts firstly with the descending and the positioning.
Mm-hmm.
His descending on the gravel was terrible.
Yeah.
Like really, really bad compared to all the other guys in that GC group. Like they're flying past him on these there's not that many in the last third of the race, descent gravel sections. Of the ones that there were, he was losing bucket loads of positions. Then, because he's having to bridge and make back up those gaps himself earlier in the stage while the other GC contenders are sitting pretty, he's tired. So then when there is an opportunity when it fans out to move up, he doesn't take advantage of it. Now, maybe he just chose not to, but there were opportunities for him to move up as well earlier in the stage. And so he's not holding and fighting for wheels well enough going into the gravel sections, and then he's tired, and then that's taking the toll on his legs, and he's probably first ever time he's done a race after a rest day, longest stage race he's ever done at this point. He's coming back from the injury. He's probably not at the level he was before he crashed. It'd be almost impossible if he was. So all the positioning and technical issues and descending issues then put more pressure on him physiologically, and then that's why you see the result at the end. But he still recovered well. mean, if Almeida drops back, this gap could have been 120. So, and if he doesn't throw the tantrum, and if his handling was a bit better, so not a disaster. But yeah, how do you see it, Benji? Legs descending? What do you think?
I think it's a combination of all of them. I think that first of all, descending and legs are a consequence of each other. I think that first of all, the descending and the technique is what caused the trouble on the first section. Positioning, most of all, most likely, but technique leads to that, because once you're in a bad position and you can't move up, that's because you don't have the technique to move up. And I think by the time that he was dropped in that second group, he had to spend energy. You have to spend energy coming back every time, and then you don't have the legs anymore to try and keep up with people that didn't have to do that. They just had to follow, well, not that it is easy to do, but Ganna's wheel. I think that Bernal had to spend a lot of energy to stay on Ganna's wheel in that.
But later in the race,
Yep.
It actually wasn't that explosive a stage, Benji.
Yep.
Big break with a lot of names we expected to be there that weren't there. Big break, 14 minutes, taking it easy, the peloton for the first half of the stage. Yes, Ganna put the hammer down, but you look at this 10 kilometers to go, huge GC group with everyone there apart from Martin and Hindley and Remco. So there's Caruso, Bilbao, there's teams with multiple riders and domestiques there. Tobias Foss and Bennett were there. So that's why it can't just be his handling too. It must have affected his legs as well. And, excuse me. So I think, yes, a combination of all those. How he'll go tomorrow, I'm not sure. Big win for Bernal today in terms of GC. Here are the revised standings. Egan Bernal first, 45 seconds ahead of Vlasov. Caruso now moves into third on 112. Carthy fourth on 117. Yates 122. Buchmann moves up 9 spots to 150. Evenepoel drops 5 to 222. Ciccone drops 4 to 224. Foss moves up 9 spots to 249. Martinez loses time today, but still moves up to 3:15 back because Volta and Dan Martin and Formolo lost a lot of time. Hopefully Dan Martin and Formolo see the light. Ciccone won't see it yet, but hopefully those two go for stages now. Any other thoughts before we get into tomorrow's stage preview, Benji?
I think that first of all, we had Caicedo, who had a pretty harsh crash in the stage itself. He's out. That's a loss for Garfi. And he didn't look too amazing in the back of the ambulance, but let's hope it's not that bad of an injury. I think that's one thing I wanted to look into. I think going back onto all of what happened so far and everybody that lost time, I think that the stage did more damage than I expected. I thought it would do damage, but I did not realize that this would happen. I was still having like one bit of doubt that the stage could disappoint then, and yet it certainly didn't. And we didn't even need the rain for it. There was some rain on the first Cerrado section, but it was barely noticeable. So I don't think that played a big role. I think that Bernal did exactly what we expected from Ineos in general to do on this stage. Hammer it on the Cerrado sections, and whoever could follow, and Remco was not one of them. And that's because of, first of all, the positioning mistake we mentioned earlier, the legs not being up to standards most likely as well.
Yeah, Bernal's just way stronger too.
Yep, exactly.
Bernal's the strongest GC rider right now. And it's pretty clear. I mean, I don't know if Yates is conserving. And let's talk about options for tomorrow's stage from Siena to Bagno di Romagna. This could be a tricky stage, depending on how the GC riders want to do it. It's 212 kilometers long, so quite long. They have a 5K 5% climb at the start for the break to form, then 7.5K 6.3%. The intermediate sprint is before that climb. Sagan should try and get the break tomorrow, one would think. They then have the Paso de la Consuma 17Ks at 6%, but I think it's slightly irregular, that climb. The first half of it is steeper. They then do the Paso de la Cala straight after, 15.3Ks, 5.4%. That is more regular, not many extended steep sections, longer descent than the Paso del Carnaio, 10Ks at 5% steep sections. We have a 12% kilometer according to this graphic I'm seeing. This is a fake news climb in my view. 8.7, 7.2, 12% before pretty much a false flat ridge with a descent at the end of it. So watch out for that climb tomorrow. It Reminds me this stage, Benji, of that stage 9 one. What's the one where the climb where they attacked in the Tour de France last year?
Whatever. Whatever. The one where Hirschi almost won.
There's a descent and then a flat 4K run into the finish tomorrow in Bagno di Romagna. Are we finally going to see the GC riders care about the stage win tomorrow, Benji, or is it break again?
I think it's break.
Oh my God.
I think it's break because, well, first of all, we have the fact that Bernal's in the leader's jersey by 45 seconds, if I remember right, which means that his team is the team that is responsible for the race according to the unwritten rules. Ineos will not be pacing after breakaway. It would be stupid to do so unless people put someone in the breakaway. And I think that these two great climbs could be nice climbs to do a move on. But it's still so long to go. And after today's stage, who will be willing to put the race upside down in stage 12 of a Grand Tour? I don't think it will happen, although the parcours, I love it. I really enjoy this kind of style of parcours. 2 major climbs before a smaller one, has a bit of descent to the line as well. And I think that one rider that we might expect to attack is Ciccone because he attacks on every stage. Next to that, I still think that the break has a big chance of doing this. The uphill section at the start will cause for a larger breakaway to get away. But then again, if the larger breakaway doesn't form on the uphill, we've learned so far from your amazing lessons the other day that on the downhill section and the plateau section on top, rouleurs might be able to ride away instead of the actual climbers. And a combination most likely on this stage, though, because I don't easily see a rouleur winning this in a group with a potential climber in it, because those climbs are still quite decent, even though the gradient is not 10%. So I think that there's a lot possible here. I think that quite a few teams might have something planned. I think that it also suits the ability of setting someone in the breakaway for a satellite rider perspective. But Ineos, the problem is if that happens, Ineos will just sit up in the peloton. They'll let the gap open up. And then Trek in your example, for example, will have to pace in the peloton to make sure their rider at the front is useful. Because if he's 12 minutes in front on that climb, well, you're going to have to wait quite a long time, mate.
You can sit up.
You'll have to just sit there by the side of the road waiting for your team to arrive.
The problem with this stage is a team is going to have to try and make the decision in the bus beforehand, and their GC leader is going to have to say to them, I'm feeling so good that we need to work all day. We need to work on those 2 Cat 2s, 17Ks and 15Ks at 5.5%. I need you to flog yourself on those. This is to go for the stage, that is, because I believe on the Passo del Carnaio, I can kick away from everybody. And there's only one rider that can confidently say that to his team right now, and that's Egan Bernal. And we don't think Ineos will likely do that unless it's some other team keeps it close for them. Ineos may still do that on the final climb. We may see them pace with Ganna and Castroviejo on the 2 Category 2s, then have Moscon and Martinez smash it on the last Cat 3. But the break might have already won by that point, similar to what we saw today and the other day. So that's how I'm seeing it again. I like Gino Maeda style riders. We do have a descent into the finish, but yeah, I'm going with Gino Maeda again.
Gino Maeda, that's a rider that I think didn't do too well today, if I remember correctly. I think that he ended very far in the race. Lost in the race, 117th on 27 minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So after Groenewegen and Consani.
Can I change it?
Yeah, you can. you may change it, but I will still keep him as like a side pick for you. But in the meanwhile, for my pick, I think that we'll see quite a few people that are necessarily quite a lot of time behind, though, on today's stage in tomorrow's breakaway. When it comes to a breakaway, I should have thought about this more, but we know that Lotto Soudal will need to put people in the breakaway. Will Thomas de Gent do something on this kind of stage? He might. I'd love it. The problem is that I haven't really seen it from him so far, and that's why I'm in a bit of doubt for this kind of stage. Like, Cepeda has to do something at some point in this race, right?
He won't, mate.
He won't on this one, but I want it. If I have to select someone for this stage from the breakaway, this is way too difficult. Do you have your pick already? Because I'm still thinking.
I was going to say Roman Bardet, but he's kept himself conveniently at 3:29. Dan Martin and Formolo, they're at 7 minutes. That's not that far away that the gap can just be let go out.
Mhm.
You know, that teams with riders at 2 minutes don't want them to take 4 minutes back. So they're in an annoying sort of territory. I think I'm going to still stay with. I'm just going to. Oh,
We weren't prepped for this one.
Lafay or Maida, I'm going with.
Okay. I'm going to go with Bauke Mollema.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Bauke Mollema or Gianluca Brambilla. Okay, that's our preview of tomorrow's stage. Hope you enjoyed our recap of today's stage and what a... I don't think it disappointed, but it could have been a bit crazier too. It delivered. It delivered. It delivered. It delivered.
Okay.
With a rider, we said a rider will have serious difficulties. Bernal will be off chops, so it delivered. I'm just saying it didn't go completely bonkers like the Vinokurov Cadel Evans one. The weather didn't sort of allow that to. That's all from us today. It feels weird to look out into the sunlight to say that, but anyway, times are changing, and we'll see you with the recap tomorrow. Ciao.